Hello, Melissa Crook here from the Field Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today as we get ready to listen to Nursing, Sleep, and Becoming Your Healthiest Self with Jennifer Johnson. The ways to engage with today's episode are to think about the following things. Have you started focusing on your sleep schedule? Have you considered that? Have you thought about that? Are you getting enough hours of rest? Do you wake up a lot throughout your sleep cycle? Are you on your phone right before you go to sleep or right after you wake up? Sleep is one of the most important aspects of your health, and we should be treating it as such. Hope this gives you some ways to engage and think today as you're listening and taking part in this inspiring, insightful, really resource filled episode with Nursing, Sleep, and Becoming Your Healthiest Self with Jennifer Johnson. Thanks so much for being with us. Hello, Field Podcast audience. Welcome back this week. I've got a new friend here with me today. We met via our good friends at Podmatch, and Jen Johnson's here to share some knowledge and some experience. If you are a nurse, if you know a nurse, if you have any kind of emergency responder in your family, well, get on and listen. This is for you. And also, we all know those people. But within that, Jen's story is going to have information that's going to be helpful, insightful for women, period. Busy women out there, multiply tasking everything all the time. But the heart of this is for you people out there, you women out there that are doing all the things. You're caretaking all the time, everywhere, including in your jobs. And that requires a different kind of capacity and ask a different level of energy, especially emotionally and mentally, that you need resources to recharge and refuel and refocus and just kind of sort of maintain your sanity. And Jen's here to help you with that today because she found out on the bumpy road of life that no one was really providing that. And so she decided to be a solution. And I'm not always that upfront for what people provide because I do introduce guests by their character traits, but I thought it was very, very important to get your attention up front because these resources are so important. And of course, they're going to be listed on our website, embracinglayers.com, on our resources page. So you'll have access to them. But Jen describes herself as empathetic, resilient, stubborn, and a multitasking queen. So, Jen Johnson, welcome to the Feel Podcast.
Oh my God, Melissa, thank you so much for the intro.
Absolutely. All the flowers. So we're going to get right into this because this has got to be a big part of your life for you to even just maintain because you have multiple roles you're fulfilling here outside of your job. So talk to me about prioritizing self-care in your life. And I mean, you're a mom and a partner and a nurse and a friend, a daughter, you're all these things. So talk to me about that self-care piece for you.
It's hard. It's not easy because, I mean, just women in general, the whole idea of taking any sort of time for yourself is, I've been told on many occasions, sometimes by my spouse, that me taking time for myself is selfish. We've had talks about this.
Yes, because that's a narrative that's old and tired, and we've been getting as girls and women for millennia that we have to reframe.
I can't. It's so ridiculous. And, I continue to re-reference back to the airline. They tell you to put your mask on first when the cabin pressure changes because you have to take care of yourself first before you can take care of others. And, for as overused and tired as that analogy is, it is just so on point. And nobody bats an eyelash at that one. But, take a woman who goes like, I just need 20 minutes of silence. I need 20 minutes to get my head around what the heck the day is bringing or what the day's held. I need to just, I'm not particularly a bath girl. It's not my thing. Yeah. So, listening to my car, like just being in the car, turning on the music to like full tilt and just, belting it out. I'm sure my kids think I'm absolutely nuts, which is fine. But I'm just like, that I got this buildup. I need to let go. And it's either that or screaming at my children, whom I love dearly. So it's hard.
Yeah, but that's a good example of like, it's either or. Pick what you want here, folks.
Pick a battle. Pick an absolute battle. Because it's nonstop. The expectations, I absolutely love to just say, you got to forget expectations because they're the number one killer of your joy as a woman, as a nurse, all these things, because, society in general has a idea, and every generation's got a little bit of a different idea about what a woman should do and what your role is and what your expectations are. And I love to throw that out the window. I ended up it wasn't my idea, but I ended up in talking with somebody else talking about like, I've entered my villain era. I'm almost 40. I'll be 40 in less than a month. I have full on embraced, if you're going to see me as the villain for taking time for my own self-care, guess what? I'm going to do it. I will be the villain because it is nobody else's job to make me happy than me. That's my job, is to make me happy. It's not on anybody else. So let me just really hunker down. The kids are 9 and 10 and a half now. I've finally come out of that haze of early motherhood where you're just exhausted and you've lost yourself completely to this little being. They're finally doing their own things. They've got their own interests. They're kind of they're no longer stage 5 clingers. They're maybe just stage 4 clingers. They're starting to pull away ever so slightly. And so, sorry, didn't mean to get you on a spit take.
I know. I'm like, she's watching me. I'm cracking up because she just nailed that so spot on. And I had just taken a drink of water. So to give you a visual. Oh my gosh.
But it's, they're starting to separate just a little bit. And I'm like, okay, let's take a re-look at, what do I like to do? What am I doing for me? And, of course, with looking at me, then it's like, well, what am I struggling with? And a lot of that is, just taking time and finding stuff that makes me happy. And of course, you can't, as a woman, you can't seem to focus on yourself for too long before you go, let me help others. Like, let me just figure out what I can do to help the others, because I know that everybody's struggling and we're all having such a hard time. And, what can I do for others? And then that leads you down another rabbit hole of then entrepreneurship. Doing all these other things. So it's been an interesting couple of years, actually.
Yeah. I bet you hit some really important things there. Sometimes we got to have hard conversations with our partners because listen, when we grew up as little boys and little girls and in whatever homes we grew up in, we saw things going a certain way. We got certain messages of what should be expected. And so that can require, and when you're young and you fall in love and you don't have kids yet and all those things, that doesn't necessarily come up in the conversation. You find out later it should have, but it doesn't necessarily come up. So it might require a little bit later. And like, let's have a conversation about this. Let's reframe the thought pattern. Let me tell you why this is important for me and that this is going to be a non-negotiable. And it's not my responsibility what you do with it, but it is my responsibility to take care of me. So I'm glad that you pointed that out. I think it's really important and also used a great example. We got 2 choices. I can take 20 minutes and fill my cup and jam out to my favorite music before I come in the house and hit the rest of the day. Or I can come in irritable and angry and sour and not happy to be there and snap all your heads off because I didn't have the 20 minutes. What do we think is going to be the better solution here for everybody in this room? Becomes a pretty easy, choice once you realize and have a chance to think about that example. But I think it just goes back to those differences between the narratives between men and women and the narratives that we grow up with and how we are wired and told that we should be proceeding and what little boys are told. And we've got to change that narrative too. I was super lucky that my husband was raised by a mom that was a woman before her time. Literally, there were no gender roles in their family. Everybody learned to do the same things. There were the same expectations, whether you were a boy or a girl, brother or sister in that family. And so I was very fortunate. That is not what I grew up with, but because it's not what I grew up with, after surviving a couple, really bumpy, crappy relationships that were too much like what I grew up with, I realized, no. I'm going to ask some very specific questions and look for some very specific character traits if in this person that I determine I'm going to, spend my life with, if that's the road I go down. And so he was always, like, what do you need? How can I support you? What are your goals? That kind of thing. Even within all of that, when we first got married, he would go golf on Saturdays with buddies. And then I would be like, well, what about me? He's like, well, I'm not responsible for scheduling your time. You can schedule your time. I don't care. But go ahead and do it. Like, I'm not stopping you, but it was automatic for him to just think it was okay to go do that. Not that it wasn't okay, but I was like, well, if I do that, then I won't have this time with you. And that's our day off. And
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, well, yes, but this time is important for me to fill my cup and have my fun. And he's like, I want that for you too. So we then had a discussion of like, oh, wait a minute. I can ask for that too. I can do that too. I don't have to feel guilty about it. We did come to the conclusion that we needed to talk to each other now that we were married. I'm like, please don't just schedule that time and let's not have a conversation about it. And so we did have to come to some discussions about that. But just even with what he grew up with, there was still this inclination within him that was different than the inclination within me because of the different narratives we heard. So I think it's really important to talk about those and address those and making sure you're not letting those get in the way of you doing what you need to do for you. I think that's so important. Yeah. That goes really nicely into confidently setting boundaries. You did that. You said, nope, I need this. How long did it take you to get there? Was that something like you said something so funny? And was the start of my cracking up. It's like, I've decided to be the villain. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
If taking care of myself means I'm a villain, I am in my villain era. I'm like, I love that.
I bought a t-shirt. I'm writing, my second book is Nursing Power, and it really is hindering on that kind of ideal of stereotypes and breaking all that. But I mentioned that to somebody else again, and she ran with it. And I'm like, okay, this is very obviously hitting hard with a lot of people. And she'd never heard of that term before. Pretty sure I'm going to credit Taylor Swift with it first and foremost. But I bought a shirt that says I'm in my villain era. I'm teaching a course with Nurse Blake in August about like nurses entering, like how to enter your villain era. And my husband hates it so much. He hates it. And so I'm like, so every now and again, like he'll be at home when I'm either talking to people or doing things, and he'll hear me kind of like start to talk about it. And you can kind of like, I can feel the eye roll from like the living room. And I'm like,
it's audible.
I don't even care. It's audible. I don't even care. I don't care. No. This is what I have to do. It's not my fault that you haven't figured out that you also need to do this for yourself.
Yes. And I think that's so important. Sometimes when our partners don't come along with us on this journey and see it for themselves, it's not our responsibility to do their work. Yeah, and we have to release that. And I know that you got to release that and just like, nope, I'm responsible for me and I'm going to do this for me, but it's not my responsibility to do someone else's work, even if they're my partner. Yeah.
Love them to pieces. It's like having that really great friend that you've known for forever and you've been through everything together, but they're kind of like, they're entering the same patterns. It's that girlfriend who keeps getting back together with that really crappy ex. And you're like, you can see it coming from a mile away. And they're on, they're off, they're on, they're off. And you're just like, at a point you have to be like, yo, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Get it together. This is not good for you. It's not good for me. It's not good for anybody at this point.
Yeah. No one's winning here.
Nobody's winning. We see a pattern,
Yeah.
Let's just call a spade and it's time to walk away maybe. And again, it's that being able to give that tough love to loved ones to be like, I love you. Smarten up.
Yeah. I love you. And I'm also seeing something that I hope that you'll take into consideration because it's on repeat here. We got a Groundhog Day situation going on.
Oh my God, Groundhog Day. I freaking love that movie so hard.
Oh my gosh. So, but all that to say, you have found this way, like, I'm gonna do this. So would you just say it's the last couple of years you've gotten here, or how long did it take you to get here?
It's been a long time brewing. So, I mean, COVID, for as awful as it was, really shone a light when you finally break to nothing. And you finally have to take that really hard look around to be like, what am I doing? What is happening? What do I value? What am I really going to put emphasis on? What's my time worth? You go through all these phases. So, working the ER during COVID, burning out so hard. And then coming to a decision like, I finally need antidepressants. I've never been on antidepressants before, but like I've gotten to this point where I need help and I need more than what I can provide at this point. And so finally getting on antidepressants and lots of free therapy. Thank you very much to the psychotherapists in Ontario who donated their time during COVID.
Oh, wow.
Shout out to my therapist.
Yeah.
And getting to a point of like reframing and working on yourself and it's coming to that realization where it is a life and death moment where it's I could die and I could not survive any of this. And then it's like, okay, well, what's then really important? Let's take a really hard look at what's going on around us. And, everything's being put to the test. Everybody's at their absolute worst, personally, professionally, the whole bit. And you sit back and go, this is not what I want. Yeah. And you're finally pushed to that point where you're having to take a really hard look at things. And, that was a really hard time in my marriage. It was the beginning of the really hard time in my marriage. And over the next couple of years, trying to collect myself and then we lost, within a year after COVID, we lost our daycare provider. And so all of a sudden it's like, well, now daycare is fully on me. So it's like, oh my God, another thing, like the few bits of support that I had completely gone now. It's like, okay, well, now I got to go straight nights. Now I got to do all these things. So it got to the point of, well, I'll tell you what, if I'm going to give up all of this, I'm going to start really focusing on what I want to do. And so writing the book was so impactful and working through that. And then getting to a point of, it being accepted by a traditional publisher and finally getting that validation and then getting a little bit of confidence and moving forward and, getting stronger by the month of just like, okay, like, we are getting through this. This isn't life or death anymore. We got to come out of fight or flight. We got to, it's no longer just surviving. We got to start like healing and thriving a bit. And got to the point in my marriage where like we separated for a week. And, it was just such a brutal moment, but it was me who called it. And I said, you know what, like I'm done. And it took me walking away for him to go, holy crap. Like, what is
going joking.
on?
Yeah.
And having that time for him to figure out that I don't want to lose this. I do really want to work on this. And, getting to that point where there was this huge power shift in my personal relationship where all of a sudden I'm like, now I'm the one holding the power. I'm the one saying that we're continuing, like that's a little drunk on that power, but like, you start to go, well, for a moment there, I was a single mom. I was looking at jobs. I was going to be able to make it work. We were making plans. I was in my full power at that moment going, so I can do this. That's not a problem. But now I get to do it. We've talked about it. We've gone to therapy. We've fired a marriage counselor. Like you finally go through it and you're like, okay, I really do want to do this with you. And, there was a lot of things that needed to be said that we weren't talking about, and me working straight nights and him working straight days, passing each other in the night.
Yeah, that's so hard.
Working on that was hard, but, it got to the point of, I knew that I could be a single mom, but I'm choosing to be in the relationship and having that shift of, this isn't a necessity. This is me choosing that we want to be together. And, it's been a struggle, intimacy is a struggle and finding connectivity with two young kids running, 9 and 10 running around, it's still hard, but it's getting to the point where, that honestly, that power shift was just so intoxicating that I'm like,
Yeah.
it fueled a lot of the pushing forward and going with the book and then going to conferences and the business kind of really taking off and all these things. So it's, everything happens for a reason, however crummy at the time, but
Yeah.
it's been a moment of, I'm taking care of my happiness. Now we realize that you were relying on me for everything, emotional support, physical support. You didn't really have any friends that you didn't go out. You didn't have any friends that you hung out with. Like, it was just work and home. And so there needed to be more. So pushing him to like, hey, you want to get back into the Masons and do all these things. Like, you need to get out. You need friends.
Find those friendships again. Rekindle some relationships or make some new ones.
Something. So getting there and so evolving as a person, as an adult, as a woman, as a partner, like all these things, and realizing that has to happen because I'm not the same person I was at 22. Very much so. So
no, I thank you so much for all of that. That is that's life. That's life right there. And thank you for sharing that. And I hope I didn't interrupt you. Were you still?
No.
Were you still? Okay.
No, to be fair, I could just go on.
No, but you I'm sitting here listening all the time. I'm like, this is what real life looks like. These are the conversations that we have. But when you were able to start seeing the relationship as a choice, when you can see your life and the choices you have versus what you're stuck in or what you feel stuck in, what you don't see a way out of when you can flip that changes everything. Because then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a minute. I do have some sort of say in this. I do have some control. There are some things that I can make decisions on that are healthy for me, that are in my best interest, not just because I, quote, have to. I want to. And that is a really important, powerful flip that you made there. And I appreciate your vulnerability in sharing that information, because more of us go through that than we talk about. Oh, and there is so much, and I think, and there's just all of these, like, people have all these impressions of what they see from the outside, and they really don't know the nuts and bolts of what go on the inside. And those, relationships that have those moments and those conversations. And I think, COVID brought out so much stuff. Like, it was such a big, glaring light on so many pieces and parts of our lives, our jobs. And really, you hit the jackpot with coming out with these resources and book when you did, because emergency responders' lives, nurses' lives had a giant, light and magnifying on them of the difficulties and the problems and the stressors and the expectations of you during this unfounded time. Like, no one had been in our lifetime had been through this before. There was no blue book for it. There was no script. There was no guide. Nobody had any freaking idea what to do from day to day. And then you guys were on everybody else is staying home. You guys are at work more. I mean, everything else that everybody else experienced, you had the complete opposite. And I think when you start seeing the fragility of life and you start seeing how quickly it can all go away, it changes how you see your life and how you want to live it. Like, hold the fort here. I have there's an expiration date on this time on earth that none of us know. And I need to make some shifts here in my life, because for whatever time I get, it needs to be not what it is right now. And what do I need to do that? So thank you so much for all of that. Talk to me. This is a big part. You talked about the antidepressants, which is just an example of how these connections work. Taking care of our emotional health, our mental health, our physical health, our spiritual health, our sexual health. They're all health.
Everything.
They're all part of that. They're all connected. They all play off of each other. I don't have to explain the biology to you. You already know that. but just like the real life connections and impacts, that stress and unprocessed trauma and exhaustion and unspoke things that need to be said that are being held back all play a role in our health and impact. So talk to me about that. And because I think it's really important what that you've already spoken to it to some, but is there anything else you want to add to that piece?
The ongoing joke from many health providers is like, you see life and death. You really do get that frontline, first row look at how fragile life is. And we are more aware than your average person about life is short and you never know what's going to happen and all this kind of stuff. But for some reason, COVID, man, it just really hammered it home. I mean, so I don't know about you guys, but up in Ontario, when everything first shut down, we had, lots of services being offered and so much support coming through. And one of the things was there's a ton of lawyers that came through to say like, hey, we want to do everybody's wills for free. Like all the frontline workers, we want to do their wills for free. And at the time, you look back and you're like, they just want to offer their services and make sure everybody was covered, medically, legally, and that, heaven forbid somebody, you want to give your, spouse power of attorney and you want to make sure the kids are taken care of and all these other, and like make sure you've got all your loose ends tied up. But in the moment, it's like, oh, okay, we're not expected to survive. Fantastic.
That's just sobering. Okay. Like, you're just like, you think I need that?
You're like, okay. Like this is, at the time I was like, oh, it's going to be 1 week. It's going to be 2 weeks. It's going to be another week. It's going to be another 2 weeks. It's, it's just going to like slowly, the slow progression of it and just everything extending. And, it just was insanity. So when, the thing we don't ever talk about enough, especially like as frontline workers, is just sleep. Sleep is so imperative. And, I'm strictly nights right now. I've been mostly nights most of my career. You get used to, napping before the first night shift and trying to nap as much as you can in between night shifts. And after your last night shift, you try to sleep until like 1 or 2 or 3, depending. And with COVID, with daycare shut down and we didn't have any access to any support. And my husband was also, so he's infection control. So he was also at the hospital, so we had nobody at home. So I was working straight nights, going to work 7 to 7. So getting off 7 in the morning, husband would go to work. I would stay up with the kids because they were 4 and 5 at the time.
Oh my gosh.
And you can't really nod off with a 4 and 5-year-old running around.
Jeez Louise. The house will be on fire.
100%, let alone destroyed, but just on fire.
Absolutely. So, literally and figuratively.
Yes, absolutely. Somebody's running around with a knife and you're like, how did you get that? And it's a whole thing. You're like, you're up on the counters. When did that happen?
I know.
You're climbing into the refrigerator and it's just a whole thing. And so, staying up all night, maybe getting a nap for 2 or 3 hours if we were lucky. Then staying up all day and then maybe getting a nap for maybe an hour when my husband come home before going back in and staying up all night and maybe getting a nap. Like I had no concept of how much sleep deprivation completely destroyed you. This is why it's used as a torture device. I had no concept. So like, God bless my therapist. She like, that was first and foremost on her list was like, you need sleep. You need to prioritize. Is there any way that, maybe you can move your shift to the weekends and just work the weekends so that your husband's home so that you can actually get sleep in between and trying to, batting around all these different ideas about how we could make this work. And at the time, like nobody took sick time when everything first started because you didn't know if you were saving up your sick time because you were going to be on a vent for an unknown period of time.
Absolutely.
So nobody called in sick unless you were actually, COVID symptoms and you had to stay home kind of thing. But for the most part, like everybody just did their shifts that they were scheduled. That was it. Nobody picked up. Nobody called in. You just did what you did and went out. And so it was just this interesting dynamic of finally being very forceful about, I need to be very thoughtful about work because like my health absolutely is in the balance. And am I going to expose myself any more than necessary
Sure.
for what's going on? So it was a wake up call to boundaries for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, napping any possible chance you got and being really intentional with that. And it's at least lingered that way. Whereas now, you know, I was on nights last night and I got up at 1 this afternoon, which was probably a little bit earlier than I anticipated, but I was just like, I'm up and the kids are running around. It's a PA day. So of course, you know, you feel like you're missing out on time with them. And
sure.
so it's the constant battle of, you know, what's going to take the hit? Is it going to be time with your kids? Is it going to be sleep? Is it going to be work? Is it going to be working out? You know, somebody's always going to lose, and it's pretty much always going to be me. So how do I want to lose?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good way. I mean, it's kind of a somber way, but it's the truth you face, especially when your kids are young and at home. A friend of mine, I talk about this all the time. A guest that I've had on here, Valerie Rivera, she's like, whatever you're saying yes to, make sure you're okay with what you're saying no to within that, whatever that looks like. You got to look at both sides of that because there's a tipping point on both sides. So you got to make sure you're okay with that. And I think too, you know, finding the time where it already exists. It's like, okay, do I have to do those dishes right now? No. They'll still be there, but I could lay down for an hour. Exactly. Yep. And, you know, so, you know, being really mindful about those things, that what really matters in that, I think is so important in that sleep piece. I mean, and you all, I think it's so interesting in the healthcare industry. I've always thought this was fascinating. And I told you before that, you know, my sister-in-law is a nurse manager, and my brother is also, he's a cardiac NP. So I've got two.
Oh, Jesus. You're all sorts.
We cover it. And his shifts early on, he had to do the funky shifts, but he was able to get into pretty regular shifts. And he was very mindful about career choices. He turned down upward moving career choices that were going to cost him with his family, with his time, with his quality of life. And so he could have made some career moves that would have been huge, but he was like, it's not worth it. It was that yes, no thing. It's not worth the exchange. My sister-in-law's had took her longer to get to a point where she was off the nights. But I'm like, here in the healthcare industry, we talk about all the time the importance of sleep. Yet some of our most sleep deprived, stressed out individuals are healthcare workers. We've got
the ones caring for you.
Exactly. There's a cognitive dissonance here, folks. I feel like we need to talk about this. But you hear about it all the time, which this led you on this journey that you're on. And you do it so beautifully. We'll get to it in a minute, but that sleep piece and the impact it has on your mental, emotional, physical health, we cannot talk about that piece enough. You talked about earlier, the impact it was having on your mental health and needing the help and assistance with that, because you're not only sleep deprived, you're dealing like the level of trauma that you deal with in your job on a daily basis anyway, and then add in a global pandemic to the mix. Like, wow. I mean, one therapist might not be enough. I mean, honestly, to impact all of that. I think there's so much truth to that. But I mean, thank you for mentioning, I think the sleep, like, man.
Oh, so hard.
Don't miss the sleep part. And, when you're looking at different health pieces, how's your sleep? Because it impacts anxiety, depression, blood pressure, heart health. I mean, there's, especially in women, there's cortisol levels. I mean, there's so many impacts, so many impacts. So I'm glad you brought attention to that. I think that's huge. And the shifts you all work. So I think, to be continued in the healthcare industry, I know we can't shut down hospitals at nighttime and just leave the patients to be at their own will.
Like, I get, guys. See ya.
I get that. Good luck. See you in the morning. Hope it all goes well. The drip's right there. It shouldn't run out. I
just keep pressing the silence button. It'll be fine.
I know that's not this, but I do think it's an interesting thing that goes on that has to be continued years and really drove you to do what you're doing now on the entrepreneurial side in the book and those resources that we'll get to in a minute. But and this goes nicely into how we can support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically. Your villain era is exhibit A of that. I mean, honestly. And also too, but I really want you to talk about the resources that you've come up with. This is how you're showing up unapologetically for yourself and for other women, and specifically nurses.
Yeah. So everybody keeps saying, oh, we've got a shortage of nurses. No, you don't. You've got a shortage of nurses willing to put up with the bare minimum. That's what you've got.
Ooh. There's the reframe.
Here's the reframe. This new generation of nurses that are coming out, you want to talk about heroes in nursing. I was never comfortable with it. I just showed up to a job that I was already good at, that I was already trained at. I just kept on. I changed nothing. That's what I did. The ones coming into nursing during the pandemic, those are the real heroes. Those are the ones who looked at everything going on and went, you know what? I want in. Insanity. Kudos to those people. Absolutely unwavering support and strength to those. But it's just one of these things where, they're like, oh, we don't understand why nurses are leaving. Really? It's because nursing school, while as much as they try to get you into it, there's an entire different language that you need to learn. There's an entire different sleep schedule. There's an entire different coping mechanisms. There is being witness to society, the worst of society, on a daily basis. And then when we're assaulted, the first question out of your manager's mouth can be, well, what could you have done differently? Pardon me.
Which is just another chapter in the woman's book of how it was your fault, not somebody else's.
I can't even. That's a whole other side note, and especially with everything that's just happened in the States with Leela getting attacked and the administrator's comments. Again, whole other side topic. But you're not well prepared for all of the different emotional and soft skills that it takes to be a nurse, because no one really teaches you, how do you grieve a patient? How do you grieve a patient that you knew for all of 30 minutes and they were dead the whole time? How do you come to terms with that as a person? Death is so taboo. It's so off limits. There's no access to it in safe, supportive spaces where you're not responsible for things, so that when it does finally happen and you're the nurse, you're the one who's in charge of things, and you have to go, nursing school, they're trying their best, and the message that you usually come out with is, you're going to save everybody. You're going to change the world. You're going to do so much good. When in reality, it takes an entire shift to go from death as the enemy to, providing a comfortable, dignified death is probably one of the most sacred things that I can do for somebody. That took a lot of time and effort. And that was getting a palliative care certificate before even finishing nursing.
Wow.
I still had to get that understanding. And so, the grief piece, the wellness piece about, taking care of yourself. The focus is always on the patient and the family, and what can you do for the patient, and how can you go above and beyond, and the underlying messaging, especially when I was going through school and first starting, was, you're not a good nurse unless you give everything of yourself. If you leave even one iota of care and compassion for yourself, well, that could have gone to a patient. Oh, you're so selfish. Again, a whole other sidebar piece on.
Never mind, your cup's empty, so there's nothing to give anyway.
Yes, yeah.
So what am I giving from?
That's not our concern. You can figure that out on your time. Getting comfortable with learning, and you graduate nursing school, you write your NCLEX, you get through, you're so excited, you get your first job. They give you some orientation. If you're really lucky, Ontario's got a new grad guarantee where you can get 6 months worth of full-time work being paired with somebody. So you're not actually working. You're being paired. So it's an extended orientation. And usually you typically are guaranteed a full-time job after that's over.
Okay.
So So at least they can get into, and usually the place that you're getting hired is somewhere where you've already done a clinical rotation in your 4th year. So you kind of get exposed to a couple of different places. And oh my gosh, these kids. The internet shut off, heaven forbid, because it's close to the time that they get home from school. So we're like losing it because the internet's off for half a second.
Oh.
And getting used to the fact of getting all this extended orientation, but sometimes you get maybe 6 weeks. You get maybe 6 weeks, and you're being pulled off early, or you're being put into a position while you're on orientation where you can take that room, right? You can take the patient assignment. We'll all be here, but you can take that patient assignment, right? Well, no, that's me working on my own. I'm supposed to be in orientation. I'm not supposed to exist. You're not supposed to count me as staff. But very often, you're pulled off orientation early. You're utilized, more fully than you should be. So you're pushing people the second they get onto the floor, and being short-staffed, the risk of violence, the overwhelming need to get used to what you're doing. And then that responsibility piece is so huge that you really can't feel that until you've got your own license. And then you feel the weight of having to make sure that license is taken care of. And so, you're carrying all this around, and then you're fumbling through your first shifts, and, everything goes by so fast, and trying to keep track of what's going on. And we always say, like, something interesting comes up in the day, or there's a medication that you're not sure of, the side effects or what it affects, or the pathophysiology. Maybe you want to dig it a little bit deeper into that when you get home. You're like, I'll just remember that. No, you won't. You shut off the second you that ding that you hear when you touch your badge to the Chronos machine. You hear that ding, and like you shut off. Yeah, it's done.
Me too.
Yes. So you're done, and you're just trying to like, okay, let me drive home. Let me, and then you're worrying about what you have to do at home. So it's one of those things where, how can we keep track of the little wins? Because it's the little wins that really make a career. But when you're starting out, you're looking for those big wins. I want to do CPR. I want to get somebody back from the dead. I want to save somebody. Sometimes those don't happen for years.
Yeah.
They don't happen. And so you really need to be okay with feeling like you're losing for at least 2 years full time. And that's coming into a med surge floor, which is kind of your entry level spot to come into, let alone like if you happen to get started into a specialty like emerge, like, oh my God, these poor, I want to call
thrown
them kids,
to the fire.
Usually, you want to learn by trial by fire. Here you go. Because emerge works so differently than the floor, and it's a whole different set of, you got to fast pace and organize and have 15 things going on and keep track of them and all these different things. And then realize what could turn into a bigger emergency, what could, if this happened to turn out to be something worse, you could get caught with your pants down if you're not really careful. All these different things that you really could get burned badly if you're a new grad and you're put into the emerge and you're not given enough support and that kind of stuff. So this is where the journals came from. I ended up speaking at Brock University, which is one of our universities up here that's got a nursing school. And so the professor reached out and she's like, hey, do you want to teach a 3-hour lecture? I'm like, pardon? Like on what? She's like, whatever. She's like, whatever you want. I'm like, she's like, just tell stories. I'm like, okay, good stories or bad stories? She's like, I'm like, do you want them to stay or do you not want them to stay? She's like, well, we want them to stay. I'm like, oh, I've got less of those stories. So I'm like,
I don't have 3 hours worth.
But of course I could talk for forever because almost 17 years of ER, stories out the wazoo. So ended up, doing the two different classes, but like they were first year of nursing school. So like they are so fresh. And honestly, they were all so on point. All their questions, how do I prevent burnout? How do I manage work-life balance? How do I mitigate, sleep deprivation with night shifts? How do I grieve somebody? And so all these journals were all born out of first year nursing students and what their needs were. And so I'm like, well, let's try and put this together and create some supports. And truly the response to the journals has been just so fantastic. And things are starting to move and shake and pick up. So I'm just, now it's trying to figure out how to be an entrepreneur as a nurse still working and mitigating the border, like the Canada versus US border issues and taxes and tariffs and all these kind of things.
That's a whole other podcast.
It is a whole other thing.
Christmas.
I can't even.
Yeah.
If I could figure out what the heck a routing number is, I literally had to physically go into the bank to sit down to be like, hey, I'm going to go teach for Nurse Blake in August. They want to do a wire transfer. The hell is a wire transfer? So she had to sit down and explain everything. And there was like 6 different questions and answers to whatever you needed. So I'm like, I can't do this online. I can't talk to people like on the phone. I don't enjoy that at all. It stresses me out to no end. So I was like, I just need to go in and get solid answers for this.
Yeah.
For this question.
Show me where to find this.
Where are the answers? So she, thank God, she was so lovely and straightened things out that I didn't even know needed to be straightened out. Also the joys of starting a business during COVID and everything being online, that I had missed a lot of steps. So reaching out for help and asking for help of others is a huge issue for me. So that's another thing where it's, you think you're ticking along, you're doing okay. You're like, oh, that's a sore spot. But why is it a sore spot? Well, because people are supposed to ask me for help. I'm not supposed to ask for help. I'm supposed to be the help. So it's figuring your mind around that and being okay with reaching out and kind of putting yourself out there. It's a learning process.
Yes, it is. I was listening back to an episode that I recorded a couple of weeks ago, and she talks a lot about this with new moms. And we came up, kind of coined the phrase, help care is self-care.
Yes.
So
yes,
it is.
I love that.
It is one of those really undervalued, overlooked parts. But we as women, we think, because we've been trained with this mindset that we can be all the things. And it's like, there is nothing wrong with you or asking for. People want to help, but they aren't mind readers. So they don't. And especially if you're a go or do or go getter, they don't see you as someone who needs help unless you state that to them. And you haven't failed. You've actually are really victorious because you understand the need, and it's just going to free you up in other spaces and ways when you're willing to do that. But it's hard. I'm still learning how to do that.
So even as a new mom, you think, oh, I'm a nurse. I've got some perinatal experience, and I've got a little bit of extra education. I should be fine to breastfeed. Wrong.
Oh,
so wrong. Should have gone to the class, but like a genius, I thought I already knew it. No. Horrible.
Well, and every kid's different in the latching. I mean, this whole
didn't want to
thing.
do the things. You just sat there and you just, reaching out for help and really not getting anywhere and having to push for it. And finally, I think we were like 3 or 4 weeks in, and he really wasn't gaining like he should have been. So I finally went to see a nurse practitioner, and she's like, why don't you just try formula? I'm like, oh, but we're supposed to, breastfeeding is best, blah, 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 blah. And so I'm like, she's like, just try it. And so that was the validation I needed, just to try it. So jumped the border, went into Walmart, picked up some pre-made formula. The kid starts crying and you're already like losing it. And it says on the bottle on the box that breastfeeding is best on the formula bottle. I'm like, I know breastfeeding is best, but he just won't do it. And crying and having some man try and come down the aisle and like double back.
Oh my
freaking out in the aisle. And so, getting home and trying it, and that kid sucked back those 2 ounces. We were supposed to just try for 1 ounce. She's like, just try 1 ounce, see how it goes. He sucked back those 2 ounces before I could even count 10. And then the mom guilt sets in to be like, oh my God, I've been starving my baby. And that's a whole other roller coaster.
I know, the things that we do to ourselves.
Brutal. Absolutely brutal.
I know.
So to any new moms, the nurses do not have it figured out either. It is okay to come and ask for help.
Yes.
It's supposed to be kids are being raised by a village. That was the idea because everybody's got a different set of knowledge.
Absolutely.
So do not stress because we've all been there.
Yeah.
We've all struggled.
100%. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you for that. And that journal piece, I tell you what, but I think it's so interesting, the transition we've seen. I've got a millennial and 2 Gen Xers as my grown children, and they
you poor
have,
bastard.
it's been very interesting. And it was an adjustment because we realized over a time that we could learn from them too, but it was really them taking in the experience they saw us having and being really like, that part worked. Y'all, you went to college, you got the degree, you got married, you got the car, you got the house, you did the thing. But did you ever ask yourselves if that's what you actually all really wanted? Or you just followed the script that was, you're going to be the first generation to do all these things, collectively and as a majority, and everything's going to be better because of it. And somewhere in there, we forgot to ask ourselves what we wanted. And so yeah, I know. And so they've taken that next step, which, at first when my oldest was the first one, and they're all 2 years apart. So they're within 4 years. At one point I had 19 months and a baby.
God.
Yeah. Survived that. Everyone's grown. Everyone's head's still on. Everyone's
Attached.
standing up straight. We all still talk to each other. Exactly. Everybody survived. But the first time my oldest came home and talked to us about boundaries around conversations and if they got too emotional, stepping away and coming back to them. And I'm very like a reactionary. I'm going to say what I got to say. And by God, you're going to sit there and listen to it until I'm done. And I'll decide when I'm done. You won't decide when I'm done. That's very much the environment I grew up in. And the family I grew up in, you had to be the loudest voice all the time. And as a girl, I had to be even louder. Just to try to be heard. No one was listening. Everyone was just yelling over each other. It was completely counterproductive. But when that's what you know. And so the first time, so it sounded good in practice. And then her and I got in a conversation. I can't even remember what it was about. This was, she was still in college, whatever. We're having a conversation. We weren't agreeing on something. And I was getting more kind of emotionally charged. And she's like, I'm going to stop this conversation right now and ask that we come back to it tomorrow. We're not going to get anywhere. You're getting very upset and bothered. And I was like, I'm not done yet. I'm not done talking. You're not going to tell me when I don't decide. You don't get to decide that for me. And she's like, well, I get to decide if I'm going to participate in it, which means you're not going to be talking to anybody. And that was a very like light bulb moment of, maybe I can learn something from this approach, but because it is a big switch in the narrative, the way they view the world. But I also credit that with the questions those students were asking you, because those weren't questions any of us were thinking of asking.
I don't think I've ever asked them myself.
I know. That's just it.
I never thought of that.
Yeah, this framework that I use here on this podcast is largely due to the lessons I learned from my 3 daughters and mentoring a college student through a mentoring program I was working with. So I was working a lot with that age group. And through that, I'm like, there's some really good practices here that maybe as women, we need to be a little bit more mindful of applying and to help us stay on track, be true to ourselves, make sure we're aligning our time and our spaces with things that are actually authentic to us and not just listening and not assuming a thought or a narrative is truth just because it's what someone told you or what everybody else is doing. Unpacking, is that actually true for me? Is that actually what I want out of the situation? So yeah, thank you for all. Oh my gosh, so good. And really goes nicely into coming back to your why and your values and what you do and what you value and it was important to you. You talked about earlier, you realized you had a choice on how your life was going to move forward, whether it was going to be in this relationship, in your marriage, or out of this relationship. You were able to sit down and really identify your values, your time, what was important to you. You were able to create this journal off of feedback that you learned of like, these are the things we need to do to make sure well and have bandwidth, whether it's 20 minutes jam into my music or writing down the emotions I'm unpacking and feeling from that shift so that I don't take on everyone else's grief. So I don't take on everyone else's stress. So I'm able to be empathetic without taking it on. And that's a practice. That's something you have to be really intentional about.
Yeah.
So talk to me about how just kind of the awareness that brought to that why values piece in doing this, because you had a very clear why of doing these journals.
Yeah. It just, the question always came back to, what would I have done, or how would my practice have changed, or how would I have survived better had I had the support when I was going through it, right? It always came back to that. My first job, first 5 years, like I was bullied so hard and it was miserable and I hated it. And it just, it took everything in me to continue to go to work. And it just, it got to a point where spite won, and it was like, well, it got to a point of, I'm going to be the most educated nurse to ever leave this place. And, the night shifts, the town was less than 5,000 people. It was just me in the ER working it, and we'd call the physician in if it was overnight. Nobody was staying there. There was one registered nurse and 2 registered practical nurses, or LVNs, on the floor. And there was only like 12 to 14 beds on the floor. And most of those people had been there for months waiting for long-term care beds. So it's not like there was a lot going on. And little things turned to like mountains out of molehills for sure. You'd get hauled into the office if you didn't put extra lined paper into the charts on night shift for day shift, even though it took all of 3 seconds. And the charts here, the paper's right underneath it. I'm like, I don't understand why we're freaking out about this, but that was the expectation and all this kind of stuff, because there was nothing else to focus on.
Sure.
So to go in every day and have so much scrutiny, and I was a Southerner up north, and in the small town where my husband's family, they'd been there for generations, and so everybody who came into Emerge just to be like, who are you and who are you dating and what's going on and what's your life story? And I'm like, do you have an emergency? Like, why are you here? That was for months. That's all that happened, was just people more interested in what I was doing and who I was versus their own like medical concern. Because again, it was the small town, the gossip, it just, it was a whole different atmosphere and very different from what I grew up in. So, I was very authentically myself at work, maybe filtered ever so slightly, and then myself at home. Whereas my husband, who'd grown up in that town and was also a professional in that town, like he was very different at work and very different at home. So he'd be exceedingly professional in the community. He'd be exceedingly professional at work. And then he'd come home and he'd be just such a goofball, like off the wall, acted like a 5-year-old goofball, and like just all this pent up energy and wanted to play around and goof around. I'm like, what's going on? Like, what is happening here? Like, this is a very different, I've never seen this before. And he's just like, well, I can't do this at work, so I got to do it at home. I'm like, what do you mean you can't do it at work? Like, yes, you're a supervisor. Yes, you're responsible and professional and all this stuff. But like, you're working with people who you've grown up with, that people who have known you since birth. So like, I don't understand why there's this huge disconnect. And my mother-in-law kind of same thing, she owned the Esso station in town, and it was a gossip hub. And she was very much one person at work and then a different person at home. And I'm just like, I don't understand why, like, the effort to have 2 different personalities was just so bad. And it never sat well with me. And so, to just be my authentically goofy, weirdo self clearly did not fit well as being an outsider. So was not welcomed at all. So it's interesting.
But that also gets very clear. I'm like, okay, this is important to me, and I'm not going to sacrifice this because I'm living in a fishbowl of people curious out of boredom.
Very much so. I don't know how the town did not blow up when Facebook was invented. Like, I swear, so the ongoing joke in town was, so there was no stoplights in town. That's how small it was. And the ongoing joke was nobody uses their indicator lights to go left or right because everybody knows where you're going anyways.
So, they all know where you live. They know when it's time to go to the store. You must need gas.
Like, everybody's so on top of each other because there's literally nothing else to do, that, it just, the gossip and the BS and just, it was just so much.
My gosh.
So much. Yeah. But a very interesting take to be able to then compare to like Southern Ontario nursing where, nobody gives a crap. Like,
we got work to do.
Yeah, you're like, oh, you've got kids. Great. Never, work with these people for 5-10 years. Never learn my kids' names. Fine. I don't necessarily know your kids' names either. It's not like we've got a lot of time to sit around and gab and dissect everything. So it was definitely an interesting perspective.
I bet it was. Oh my gosh. Well, and this goes really nicely into the expectations piece. Like you said early on, you
forget them.
Figure it out and learn, forget about it. I am not living out of somebody else's expectations of me. I've got my own expectations. I'll live from that place. I'll communicate those. You all can do with your expectations of me what you want, but they are not going to define who I am. Talk to me about getting to that absolute point. And I would imagine that early on stages you talked about in Northern Ontario were a big part of that.
It's 100%. It's just like, once you figure out, you take a step back and go, oh, this is what's going on. This is what everybody's doing. This is what everybody's got, these two different personalities, and you're just like, this is so odd that I'm not going to participate. I'm going to pull back a little bit. I'm not going to participate. It's not worth my time. And once you figure out that, people are going to have all sorts of opinions about you, regardless whether they're correct or not, or informed or not, or if they even have ever talked to you and they've got opinions about you. They're like, what's the quote? Other people's opinions are none of me or none of my business.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, you got very good very quickly at being like, whatever, I don't care.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to have a thought process on what you're doing. So why would you possibly limit your happiness or what you could do or any of this based on somebody else going like, oh, I don't think you can do that. Me personally, my personality, I'm like, watch me.
You want to bet?
You want to bet? So, and my husband has figured this out where he'll go like, oh, I don't think you're going to do that. Knowing full well, I'll go, pardon? And just knock it out of the park. And then he goes, well, I knew you could. I just needed you to get going. So
you're still lighting a little fire under there.
Oh, got it. But that's my personality. That's just, I love proving people wrong. I love watching people go, you've done what? Like it just, and blowing people's expectations. Cause again, so if this is just an audio only podcast, I'm your typical white woman, glasses, brown hair, blue eyes, mid-range weight. And, the number of times in a day that I get, oh, you look so much like my friend so-and-so. I'm like, yes, I look like your basic white girl. I understand. I get it. I appreciate it. But it's just like, so if I just look like everybody else, then people have expectations of what you're going to look like, what you're going to sound like, how you're going to talk. Yeah. So when I get very raunchy very quickly, when I drop, swears like nobody's business, they all just kind of like look at me and I'm just like, what? Like, I love that moment when people's minds are blown because they think that I'm just going to be very soft-spoken and quiet and, demure and all this kind of stuff. And I blow it out of the park, or I tell them stories about things that I've done previously. I modeled nude at 18 for my arts department. People go, what? I'm like, why not? Like, I knew it wasn't going to get better. It wasn't like,
it was the moment.
It was the best paying job on campus. You literally had to sit there. But truly the most painful job I've ever done because you don't realize how much it hurts just to not move. And so being a little ADHD, you had to disappear into your head and go off into a million different directions. And I was able to do it for a period of time. And then, other work came up. So I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. So it makes a little bit more sense. I don't like getting cold. It was Thunder Bay. Like
that was the other thing. It's like cold. That's the first thing that came to mind is just being freezing. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and they want you to sit in like odd angles, not like crazy angles, but just odd angles. So you're not just sitting straight equal, straight on. You're sitting on the floor and you've got one leg up or crossed and then you've got one arm behind you. And like, you have to sit like that for hours. They give you breaks, obviously, but you're sitting there for hours. It's hard. So to be able to like tell people that information about me and watch their minds be blown is like the best thing ever. I love it. I love when people think that they know me just by looking at me, and then I get to blow their expectations out of the water. So, for me, it's always been, this is my life. I'm going to live my life for me. I'm not going to live it for anybody else as much as I want to live it for my beautiful children. What happens when they go off to college? Then I'm a shell of a person. I'm a shell of a person because I no longer have my children to like lean on and make my whole world. I am an individual.
Which it's not their responsibility to do that in the first place, which is
and that's a whole other
that's a whole other conversation. Yeah,
a whole other psychology conversation there.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I'm gonna do what makes me happy because my kids, yes, they see mom tired, but they also see mom happy. They see mom getting to be creative, and then all of a sudden, my kids want to write their own little books. I'm like, I guess they're very observant. They know exactly what's going on. So why not be happy for them? And show them that that's what life actually is. You want your life to be happy and fun and do things that you love while having some responsibility and managing it. But their life is not just school, work, die. That's not
living. That's not living.
No.
Exactly. Oh, thank you. That was so good. Thank you so much for that. I love that so much. Accepting the layered aspects of ourselves, which goes right into, you gave a great example earlier when you were going through that bumpy time in work and your marriage, all those things. That's life. There are tough seasons. We make decisions. We say things. We don't do things. There's so many pieces that go into it. And there's pieces we love, there's pieces we don't love, but we have a tendency to want to stuff and ignore the things we're embarrassed about or we have shame about, and we just want to have the highlight reel. Life doesn't work like that. You've got to get to a point where you can acknowledge all the pieces or they will creep back up in a not so pleasant way. You've got to have a place and space to move through those things. So talk to me about your layers journey, and because you've clearly, you were, from every indication, you're there, you're continually being there and doing this work, and you've created things that allow you to continue to be there and a life that allows you to continue to be there. But talk to me about your journey with that.
Yeah, it's one of those moments where you finally get to decide, like, life is ups and downs. It's always going to be ups and downs. It's been that since moment one. You can't be happy 100% of the time. You can't be sad 100% of the time. But how you choose to embrace those moments, really can either bring you up or tear you down. So, social media could go down a rabbit hole about, especially mothers. Oh my God, everyone's posting perfect baby pictures and photo shoots and the nurseries are immaculate. And, the lunch, oh my God, the lunches are packed beautiful. Like it's like 16 layers of beautiful lunches. I'm like, all BS.
Highlight reels.
Exactly. Show me the real. You are doing no service. You are actually doing a disservice to absolutely every single person that's coming across these photos without then backup photos to be like, well, here's a crap day.
Here's the bloopers reel.
Here's the bloopers reel. Here's me getting, poop all over me from my kids. Here's me, here's the kitchen. It's a disaster. Here's me getting fired from my first job. Here's me having to go through the motions to fight to get that job back and go back to nursing in that small town and getting through that. That was hard. That was a year of absolute ridiculous trauma. That's me, getting my book to a traditional publisher. That you want to talk highs of highs, such a high. 2 years after moving, waiting for the book to move into editing and then going into editing and getting it there for 3 months, thinking that the book's going to come out in another 9 months and it's finally going to be done. They gave me my rights back. They said, we're actually going to go back to physiotherapy books. That's kind of our main base. We appreciate your book, but this is not for our audience. We're going to give you your rights back and here's your book back and good luck with it.
Gosh. Wow.
And for 2 years, I've told people I'm going to be traditionally published. Like that's a huge deal. You put no money forward. It feels like you're so validated because somebody completely outside of you also really believes in this book. So much so that they're going to fund to edit it and put it out there and do all the things. And then they give it back to you. And it's like, so now what? So I took 2 days to be absolutely miserable, really feel it, really get in the, I have got every right to be so upset right now. Feel it, be upset, be moping, eat all the ice cream, do it. And then after 2 days, I'm like, well, I've got an option. I either apply again, wait potentially another 2 to 3 years. That's if somebody accepts it, and then potentially have this happen again. Or I hunker down, put the money up, publish the book myself and go for it and not really worry about that approval piece of having it being traditionally published. Whereas now I'm self-publishing, in that 2 years, there actually was like quite a shift in the viewpoint of self-publishing and all this.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know what? I'm going to put the money forward. I believe in it. This is my baby. It has to get out there. Here you go. So did it. Went through all the steps, all the processes, bumps and editing took way longer than anticipated, even though I budgeted months for it. It took even many months. Cover design and typesetting. Had no idea what the heck a typesetter was. Had to pay for that. PR and doing all these things and again, very much putting yourself out there. And it's just like, okay, well, but this is it. Looking back, I always try as best as I can to find that little silver lining. And the silver lining is, with a major hospital now wanting 6,000 of these books, had I been traditionally published, my royalties would have been like 12 to 13%. With them buying from me directly now, I'm getting like 60% royalties.
Wow.
So
winning.
And, winning, more than pays for the book would, once this goes through, because it is going to go through, I'm putting it out there, it is going to go through, then I can go to more conferences and travel and meet wonderful people and build the connections and build my network and really continue to help nurses, which was the entire point this whole time.
Yeah.
But
thank you for all of that. That was such a great breakdown of layers and what happens and how we got to move through. I love how that example you gave. I sat with it. I shed the tears. I said the words. I ate the ice cream. And then I got up. But it was, that's such that we skip that piece because we don't think we have the time, or we minimize our grief. We compare to somebody else's. One of my biggest beefs in the world is toxic positivity. And I to the point where I have a whole episode that I did called Weaponized Gratitude because it's used against women all the time. Well, you should be thankful for. And it's like, just because I'm bringing up a problem does not mean I'm not thankful. I can both recognize what needs to improve and get and be better and change while simultaneously being thankful and appreciative. They don't have to be 100%. Mutually exclusive. And I feel that way about emotions and processing them, moving through them, feeling them. We don't stuff the bad ones and just highlight the good ones because the bad ones they're storing up in our body. Again, you're a nurse. I don't tell you how this works. They're going to come out in some not so great way if you don't do something with them. But they're not there to work against us. They're clues. They're indicators. And you and I've talked about this already. Anger and frustration, this can be great motivators to
spite, man.
to get
surviving
to
out of spite.
Yeah, to get to where it is you want to be, to move forward, move the needle to something that is really important to you. So thank you so much. That was so good.
No
okay.
problem.
All right. I love this. And that this is going to be really good too, because you've done this work already, but in living out feel, finding empowerment, embracing layers, which you have given so many examples of how you're doing that. Talk to me about the quality and effect it's had on your relationship with yourself, as well as your relationship with other people.
Yeah. When people see you happy, they can't help but be drawn to you. Right. And so you do have to watch out for those people who kind of want to bring you down and the energy vampires and they just want to like suck out your joy and use it for themselves and purposely push you into drama or spiral you into, whatever high emotions. But, when I get to go to work and people are like, oh my God, what's happened now? Like, what's changing? What's happening? What's going on with the business? What's the new news? Like, I haven't seen you in 2 weeks. Like, what's going on? It is so much fun to watch other people be inspired, and not to sound egotistical, but like be inspired to
absolutely
move themselves forward. And then to have people who I had no idea were in my corner really start to shine. And you go, the first day that my book reached #1 for holistic medicine and nurse and patient relations, I had somebody who I used to work with, and it had been at least 10 years since I've talked to her. She was a ward clerk. I was in the ER, but we'd like talk all the time and hang out and stuff, but we never hung out outside of work. She texted me that morning with a screenshot. She goes, I am so proud of you. I can't believe that you've done this. I'm just so rooting for you. And I'm so proud, like, congratulations. And, here I am. It's like 5 a.m. I've gotten up early just to get silence, coffee, and to maybe write a little bit. And I'm bawling because here's somebody that I have not really made an effort to talk to in 10 plus years. But she's in my corner rooting for me and saying congratulations, where I'm just like, holy cow, like I had no idea.
Yeah.
Right? So to be able to be in that moment of, I'm so proud of myself for pushing to get to this point and for following through and there were ups and downs and to continue to go through it and really take a risk publishing this, because it's a little controversial, nursing intuition, it's a little considered a little woo-woo and a little out there, but and with the amount of like personal stories that I also put out, it's just like, here's myself on a platter, and people are responding so vigorously to it that I can't help but really be so proud that we're putting a voice to it and that I've been able to put it out there.
Oh my gosh. I love that so much. And I will tell you, I agree with you 100%. People draw from your energy in a way, or they use it as like, man, she can do that. What can I do? And it's like, and it's like an invitation or almost like a permission slip to like, oh, wait a minute. Where are the areas I can thrive in? Or I want what you've got. Tell me more. I think there's so much to that. Yeah. And then finding out who you're surrounded by. I think it's so interesting when you go through these different times that you can find people that will come out there in your corner that you're like, I did not see that coming.
Yeah.
And it's such a revelation and such a, powerful reminder. But thank you so much. Of such a good example. All right. We are down to the rapid fire here. Name 5 activities that nourish you.
Sleeping, eating, belting out music in the car, either on the way to work or coming home from work. I love to veg out on the couch and cross stitch. It's been a while since I've done that because I've been doing the writing, but then the writing also is so much of just an interesting creative process that I'd put away because I thought, oh, I'm not going to do that. And, you know, you go through university and they beat the love of writing out of you very quickly. So it's like,
so much.
I'm never going to write an essay ever again. And here I've written this like 60,000 word book. I'm like, that could have been a thesis. Shit.
Dang it. Can I retroactive go back?
I'm like, can I just submit this to somewhere? That'd be great.
No kidding. Not have to do anything else. I'll just submit it. We're just going to start with my thesis, and that's what we just begin and end.
We'll just do that.
I love that. Oh my
graduation ceremony now.
Exactly. I've done all the other stuff already. I don't need to go back to the classes.
It's fine.
Exactly. 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
Supported, loved, joyous, excited, and thankful.
Oh my gosh. All right, Jen, tell people where they can find you, follow you. This will all be on our resources page at embracinglayers.com, but share real quick in case people want to jot it down right now.
Yeah, so you can find me at LinkedIn is probably where I'm most active. Jennifer Johnson, BSCNRN. To the nurses, don't come for me. There's a lot of Jennifer Johnsons. LinkedIn, so TikTok and Instagram is at ernurse.jen, Jenn. You can find me at rxforgrowth, forgrowth.com. And I'm always more than happy to support nurses. And if you're looking for Nurses Week gifts that are better than, like, if I hear about rock painting one more year, we will drag you. Tell the sister-in-law, if you ever give us rocks to paint, we're going to throw them. The fact that nobody's thrown them through a window is shocking. But, you know, if you're looking for something
throw them back at you.
If you're looking for something that's just a little bit different to support your nurses in their own learning and all that, obviously the journals or my book, wholesale prices.
And those are on the website?
Those are on the website. And then just email me and we can talk about wholesale prices for sure.
Okay, awesome. All right. Yeah. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I've enjoyed you so much today. I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate how you show up in the world with just that full authenticity, energy, and willingness to just say what it is, put it out there and be like, okay, how do we move forward with this? How do we live in the way that's fun? Like you said something so important, being happy, being content. You can have a hectic job and a hectic life and still be content, happy, and having fun in it. And what's the point if you're not? I mean, you know, we get this one precious life. Let's do the thing in the most enjoyable way possible. But realistically, like, I think that's a really important thing you brought out is like, I'm doing the thing, I'm living the mess, and I'm still having fun in it. And that's possible.
Absolutely.
And I think that's so important. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed this so much today. Ladies, here's your resources. You've heard it. Your next birthday gifts, Valentine gifts, book club, if you're a group of nurses, journals, so many things here for Jen to help you with. If you want Jen to help your clinic, your space, your hospital, go to that website, check her out. She's got all kinds of things for you. But take good care of yourselves this week. Find that space for yourself. Jam to your favorite music on the way home. Be the person at the traffic light that's using your steering wheel as a drum. I mean, you bring it all in. Throw it all in. And have fun this week. Whatever your life is, find that space to have fun. Thanks so much for being with me, Jen.
No problem. Have a great day.
Yay. All right. Take care of yourselves, everybody, and have a great week. Hello, Melissa Crook here. Thank you so much for joining us on the Feel podcast today, Finding Empowerment, Embracing Layers. I hope you found today's framework and resources supportive and informative. To learn more about all that we offer here at the Embracing Layers Network, visit embracinglayers.com. You can go to our contact form to schedule me as a speaker for your next conference, workshop, or seminar. You can go to our book page to order our book that Jessica Garrison, our wonderful and talented writer and author, authored with my support. And engage with this framework in written form with your journal or in a book club with other women, inviting them on this journey with you. You can look at our resources page for all of the helpful and insightful resources our guests offer and share. You can find the schedule for our weekly Together We Feel women's panel conversations that we're holding each Monday on our YouTube channel. And you can find the links to all the spaces and places you can follow, engage with us on social media, and join our engagements that are happening on our Substack site. There is also a donation page where you can donate to support our work to ensure we can continue to bring you these incredible guests, conversations, and support. Thanks again for joining me this week. Share with your friends and give us a review on your favorite listening platform. Your feedback helps us ensure we're bringing you the content that will best support you and having an empowered, embracing layers journey. Take good care, and thanks for giving us some of your valuable time today. We truly appreciate you so deeply.